Hello, and welcome to this, the first of my vlogs of 2020, and the first in a hopefully long-running series of updates on my various creative projects, where I will try to create a running series of updates for all of my creative projects, talking about them in detail, and perhaps a spin-off series or two, such as painting tutorials and coding analysis or something of the like. But that's a possibility, not something that is set in stone. Today, we're going to talk about uh, programming and game development, and I'm going to start by explaining why I do it and what my ultimate goals are, what path I've chosen uh, to get to those goals, and why, um, and what you can expect me to create both in the so what you can expect me to create both in the near future and in the end or in the distant future, more distant future. Don't think decades from now, but this is a concerning a time span of perhaps 2 to 3 years starting today. So why do I program? I didn't used to program when I was a youth. I started programming about 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, but almost. And so I'm quite late to it. I'm 37 now, so I was about 35 when I started. But I've always been fascinated by computer games. I always liked them from the first time I laid my hands on a keyboard and tried to play one, which was something along the lines of Paratrooper, if anyone remembers that game, an old 80s classic. I didn't like it particularly. I thought it was too stressful, but there was something about that which made every other kind of toy or book or whatever pale in comparison, because there was an I guess I don't know if I thought so the first time I saw a video game, but like the second time when you saw a second video game, it sort of dawned on you that there's great there are great possibilities here. um, there's an almost limitless amount of possibility, and that always attracted me. And I like games that are great in scope, and I always wanted to create them. I remember thinking about creating games for almost as long as I've been playing them. But I found programming to be a daunting prospect, and hence I did not get into it. I was also extremely in love with painting, always have been, and I focused on that mainly. So I just played games for for the most of my youth rather than make them. I did make some games. Over the decades, I made a handful of strategy games, sort of tabletop strategy games, for play with my friends. But they usually turn out to be too complex to be user friendly. Basically, there's only the one friend whom I occasionally torture by having him play test them together with me. But I finally took courage a couple of years ago and started programming, with the aim of making my dream games. So that's why I program. Um, Now, what are my end goals? What are the games that I want to play or want to make rather? What's the reason? Aren't there the games that I want to make available? I mean, there are thousands of games available, of course, but actually, no, none of those games, as far as I know, are quite the kind of game that I want to play. Some of them are close, but not precisely what I want. And I guess that's one of the reasons why people get into a business. They feel well, I'd like to see this sort of thing, but it doesn't exist, so I have to make it myself. That's why I do it. Um, and so to my end goals, a couple of things that I really want to add to gaming, or that I feel are my main areas of interest, is one, deep tactical strategy, um, and let's say strategy, or squad-based tactical strategy, or for that matter, army-based tactical strategy that is not in any to any extent based on chance, with no or none or extremely little. There might be some, but very little, if any, amount of chance. Random numbers. These games are there's always, I find, the chance to miss, or the chance to fail at any given task. I would like to create tactical, strategical games, um, which allow you the same level of control as my usual example is chess. Um, when you make a move in chess, you know that it will succeed. That's not part. There is no element of chance to the game, because you decide what's going to happen. You have your possibilities, but you always know that your move will succeed, that your piece will end up where you want it, or that when you attack another piece, it will win. That's how the game works. Um, I would like to create yeah, a strategy game which uses this kind of mechanic. Now, I don't know if this appeals to you or not, but it appeals to me, and I will go into greater detail of exactly how I envision that later on. Um, yes, and I've actually, in the background here, you see three other pictures, and the one that's in the background is actually one of my strategy games, which is a multiplayer game. 2 to 4 players can play, um, and it's that sort of game. There is no level of chance in it. No, it, every move always succeeds. So it's very similar to a board game in that sense. So that's one thing. I'll In my mind, I want to make one game that is focused only on battles, or um, yeah, struggles between players, or perhaps also against an AI. And I think I'd also like to make it part of a role-playing game in which you control a small group of adventurers, and in case of battle, it will use a system much like this. And that leads us to the second thing that I would like to add to gaming, and that is uh, really, really dynamic NPCs, and really dynamic NPCs and dynamic playing worlds. Don't get me wrong, I know that there's very great dynamic in a lot of games nowadays. Um, but I'd like to focus on that. I'd like to make it so that every NPC has a personality, in a sense, represented by a number of values. I don't know how many it would be, 10 to 50, I guess, probably closer to 50, or maybe even more. And that not only can NPCs react to what you do, various things that you do, would also include such things as NPCs reacting to each other. If they see someone, they would have relationships to each other or with each other based on their likes and dislikes and their personalities, and might even be a kind of a slight randomness to it, so that every time you play the game, the NPCs will have slightly different personalities, and hence the sort of social structure of the game, the social uh, network of the game will be different. Different people will be, one couple may be married in one game, or they might be with completely different people, or singles, or in another one, because they will or will not be attracted to each other. They will. I'd like for them also to be possible NPC adventurers. Not only interact with each other, but with the world in general. In short, to create a very, very living world. This would also include some of the animals, the monsters. There would be no regenerating animals, monsters, even plants. I'd like for all of this to be sort of consistent. If you hunt a species to extinction in an area of the map, it might come back eventually, but it really should. It's gone from there for a good long time, and possibly forever. So a really really sophisticated world in this sense. I recognize that this is a great undertaking, and I plan to take this, let's call it the effort budget, the time and effort budget would be time and attention in general from graphics mostly. I feel that we could have plenty of such games today if they focused less on graphical magnificence, because boy, do games nowadays look absolutely fantastical for the most part. Um, if you want, I'm already thinking about what level of graphics I want to aim for, and you know, quite early 3D FPS games. Think Quake, um, think Elder Scrolls Morrowind. So like the late 90s era. I think Morrowind is actually a very early 2000s game, but still late 90s era graphics, full 3D, I believe. Although I might, I'm toying with the idea of having it uh, be a sort of 2.5D experience where many things might be represented by two-dimensional sprites, in order to save uh, processor power or time for me. It depends on what I find to be most efficient, really. Those are the two main things I want to add. So really strict kind of strategy, and the dynamic um, games, and or dynamic interaction and environments. Really, really dynamic. Um, I believe this can be this oughtn't be too difficult to do, but I think it's just that it's not been a priority of game developers until now, and that's why we don't have it very much. I think they believe, and probably rightly so, that it's not a thing that is sought after by many players, but I seek it, I want it, and I believe others might appreciate it as well. I mean, it would go so far as to people having a different opinion on you depending on what kind of clothes you're wearing and what color, etc. You know, just like real people. That's the goal. Um, there's also a sort of third uh, thing, which isn't all that new, but I aim to make some sort of I have a quite clear idea actually of the first game I want to make, which uses exercise equipment as part of its controls. This might sound very weird or not, depending on how you feel about that sort of thing. I'm thinking mostly I think about things like exercise bicycles, um, or stationary bicycles, whatever you want to call them, being used to control, for example, speed in some sort of racing game, maybe some other things too, but um, this is something I feel would actually be quite interesting. I know that there are some apps for exercise equipment, very few, but I think there are some, and of course there are all the dance games and and tennis and bowling and boxing with sensor control. What are they called? The Wiimotes or whatever. They're for the Nintendo Wii and such consoles. I'm not too familiar with the market, but that's something I aim to make at least. So we have three, let's call them end goals, and they might be combined. At least two of them might be combined. The strategy and the interactivity. So, what is my path there? Uh, my path might seem to be a bit roundabout or unnecessarily long, because there are perfectly good game engines and game apps that exist to make games. I don't use those, and I don't know if I will at some point, but for a number of reasons, probably chief among them being that I really want to learn how to program, you know, from the fundamentals up. I'm at the moment, my current plan is to write my own tools and write my own graphics engines and so on. So what you have, sorry, it's there, right there, or I can point to the actual screen. Oh boy, that looks funny. Um, is an example of a graphics routine that I've been, I was going to say tinkering with, but I've been working very hard on it actually. It's the first time I managed to make a program turn a graphic. In this case, it's just a simple polygon, a 5-point polygon. I will go into terms and terminology and such in other videos for those of you who might be interested but not know about it. Um, but this is a polygon that you see, this star shape here, and it's turning around. That was actually quite difficult to do. The next step, of course, is to make it turn in another axis, basically have it turn so it looks somewhat three-dimensional. It still won't be actually three-dimensional, but it would follow the rules of a three-dimensional object. And so what I do is I work partially on learning new programming techniques and applying them in new programs, games mostly. And partially I work on solving the problems of graphics. At the moment, it's mostly graphics because graphics is quite quite tricky. At least if you want to do 3D. And if you know, I like to come up with my own solutions. If my own solutions turn out to be inadequate, then I guess I'll have to turn to traditional solutions. Look up how people write 3D engines and such. But I'm going to try to do it myself, and I think it's going decently so far. Anyway, that's the furthest I've gotten with regards to graphics algorithms to date. I'm quite tempted to write a game using this. Now, I've the two other games you see here, the one in the background and the one over there on the sort of with the white background, with the white in the white window with all the colors. Those are the two main programs I've written, apart from an art program. Actually, all the graphics that you see in these games were made in a very rudimentary and very crappy art program, a pixel art program that I wrote. One of the first things I wrote, first really useful apps that I wrote, um, that I still use. So those two, the one in the background there, which is a turn-based multiplayer strategy game, and the one you see over there, which has a distinct fantasy look about it. It's also a turn-based but single-player, a sort of adventure game. I will make separate videos about both of these, and especially for that single-player adventure game, I'm probably going to make a few videos talking about how it works and such for those people who might like to play it. At the moment, I'm working on trying to offer it as a free download on my website. Well, I try to offer both of them as free downloads, but that's something I don't have much experience with, and I have tried it once and that failed, so fingers crossed. I'd really like to do that, and so that's my method. I think I have to go into more detail about the method in another in another video because there's more to tell about that. I can say that I'm working in 2 different languages on 2 different machines. I'm working in C++ on a Windows laptop. That's where I develop. Everything you see here was programmed in C++ and is running on Windows machines. But I'm also learning to program in assembly language for the Raspberry Pi. So it's ARM assembly language. If you know what that is, that's fine. For those of you who don't know, I'll tell you in another video. Don't worry. And I'm doing that to really understand programming. I find that working in assembly language makes me a better programmer. I've been doing that for a few months, and it's really helped me understand some of the fundamental principles of programming in general, like how to address memory and use pointers and stuff that you know what it means if you program, and if you don't, you're probably scratching your head. We'll talk more about that later. So, last item on this rather lengthy. How long is this video? I don't know. It doesn't say anywhere. Never mind. It's as long as it needs to be. What can you expect me to produce? Well, I told you what my end goals are, but as I also just told you that I'm I'm just still learning how to do these things. What can you expect me to produce in the near future? Well, as you can see, I made 2 games. Both of them were made in 2019. The adventure game there was it took quite a while to make it. It started out as a small project, really small, and grew to and my aspirations, my ambition grew very large, and then I stopped when I felt I didn't really learn anything more from it, and the end product was probably about a third of the greatest aspiration that I ever had. So the end product but the end product was much larger than the original idea. I will tell you about all of that in a dedicated video. The strategy game in the background, which will also have its own video, was written in. Well, it was the greater part of it was written in a few days. The one aspect of it took quite a while, like I don't know, about a week to solve, because it was a completely new technique for me at the time. I don't think I spent more than a week and a half on it, all in all. It's a very simple game, but I think it's fun. It needs a little bit of polishing still, but it's 99% done, really. I can't promise that I won't update it in the future, but it's not so likely. In any case, I make games to learn things. I mean, currently I'm making a super simple kind of game on the Raspberry Pi. Sorry, if you don't know, the Raspberry Pi is the name of a kind of very small, quite simple computer used in teaching environments in order to teach people about computers and about programming, and also used by hobbyists like me, like I. And so I'm making a game for that. You can follow the you can follow and the progress of that game, and it's probably going to be done very soon. I don't think I'll offer it as a download because it's a piece of crap. It's a programming exercise, but I will be making I will try to make a full playable game quite soon. As soon as I finish that one, which is using letters as its graphics. It's often referred to as ASCII graphics. I will talk about that in another video. See, I promise lots of videos here. But as soon as I get to work get a handle on actual graphics, like you see here, but on the Raspberry Pi as well, I'll try to produce something interesting. Although I think as soon as I do that, the first order of business will be to make a new pixel art program. So to make the art for near future games. Something I'm inspired to make, knowing now how to do this sort of twisting stuff, like the star here, is some sort of top-down action game in which you can walk around some world. I saw a video on YouTube about an old such game. Think Desert Strike, Jungle Strike. Why am I only thinking of those two? Cannon fodder. 90s top-down action games in general. I might be able to do something like that quite soon. Hey, Grand Theft Auto, the first couple of games, they were top-down two-dimensional games. Don't expect that level of complexity, but the kind of gameplay might be similar. Okay, I think I've told you in a rather long and rambling video about my programming, why I do it, what my goals are, and what you can expect along the way. I do it quite a lot because I find it really interesting, so much that my painting has suffered for it. But I'm producing something new almost every week. Some new. I'm making progress, noticeable progress that I present almost every week, and it's something I talk about a lot in my streams. And sometimes with my followers who are interested, we talk about technical aspects of it, both aesthetic and technical and aspects, game design aspects. We have quite a lot of fun on stream discussing such subjects, and I like to hear about your projects as well, if you have any going. A number of my followers do. So why don't you come join us on stream someday, and we'll chat about it. Anyway, I hope you liked or found my plans and my and my my output interesting, and that you will want to find out more. With that, I wish you a good time of day, and goodbye. Hope to see you soon again.